and a very warm welcome back to 9-inch Charge, a Warhammer Age of Sigmar and Warhammer the Old World discussion channel. Today we are following up on Kragnos, checking out his War Scroll, seeing how he plays, and then we're going to do a bit of speculation about what this War Scroll might reveal for Age of Sigmar 3rd edition, because there are some differences here to what we've seen in previous War Scrolls. As ever, if you enjoy this video, please give it a like, and if you'd like to see more content like this in the future, please subscribe. Also, leave a comment about what you think about Kragnos' War Scroll and what your predictions are for AOS 3. I'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas, and I do read every single comment. A roaring, trampling god of earthquakes and wanton destruction, Kragnos is known as the end of empires. In his gnarled hands, the dread mace can shatter the walls of cities, even as the shield Tuskbreaker keeps him all but inviolate. Kragnos has a move characteristic of 10, 18 wounds, a phenomenal 2+ save, and bravery 10. He carries the keywords Destruction, Monster, Hero, and Kragnos, and his points have yet to be revealed, although we're probably going to say that he's going to be around the 500 point mark, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less, but only time will tell on that one. So, of these stats, I think Bravery 10 is to be expected. A god of destruction is not going to be worried about trampling his opponents and smashing some heads together. Move 10 is decent. Maybe I would like to have seen him get just a little bit more. Maybe start off as move 12. The only reason being is that he is going to need a big move because he doesn't fly and because his base size is going to be so humongous. It's going to be difficult for him to maneuver himself around the battlefield. So he is going to need a big movement. He's going to be using up all of that movement 10, I imagine. Let's talk about that wounds profile and that 2+ save. What this means is that if you attack Kragnos and you do not have rend, you are going to have to cause 108 wounds to slay him. His shield, which we will come on to later on, can also help him negate spells, which really is useful for Kragnos because he doesn't have a save against mortal wounds, but being able to negate spells will help him do this. Kragnos is a named character and a single model, and he's armed with a Dread Mace, Tuskbreaker, and Hooves of Rack and Ruin. So let's have a look at the weapon profiles for these. The Dread Mace has a range of 3, it has 6 attacks, 3s to hit, 2s to wound, a rend of 3, which is almost unheard of, and a flat damage of 4 that never degrades, for a potential 24 wounds with weapon number 1. Tuskbreaker, his shield, has a 1-inch range, 3 attacks, hits on 3s, wounds on 2s, has a rend characteristic of 2, and does D3 damage. Hooves of Rack and Ruin have a 1-inch range also. They start off with 6 attacks and can degrade down to 3 depending on the number of wounds that Kragnos has suffered. They hit on 3s, wound on 2s, have a rend characteristic of 1, and a damage of flat 2. That is a lot of dice to be rolling, and it is going to cause some serious damage on the tabletop. That rend 3 and rend 2 is really going to hurt. I really like that everything is to hit 3 and to wound 2, because nobody wants to keep referring back to the War Scroll because you can't remember all the different attacks profiles for all the different weapons, especially when you have a lot of weapons like Kragnos does. So this makes it nice and easy to remember, and will make it nice and easy on the tabletop to just keep rolling them dice and to know what you're going to hit and wound with. It's just nice game-friendly design. I do want to talk about the damage table briefly. Something that I've noticed here, I don't know if you've noticed it as well, is that there are only 4 points of damage degradation on there. So I think previously there were 5. And also he doesn't start to get any worse until he's at less than half his original wounds. What this leads to is him not depreciating so early on, and I think this is something that we're going to see in AOS 3 because it is going to be supposedly much more monster and beast focused, being set in the realm of Gur, and we do want to see monsters that do stand up and aren't just beaten back by taking a couple of wounds. So let's hope this is something we see more of. It's great for Kragnos. I mean, flipping heck, you think, oh, alright, I've caused 9 wounds to him. He's still fighting you as if he's taken none. Just before we go into abilities, there's a few things floating around his War Scroll that I want to mention. The first is that if Kragnos is included in an army whose general has the destruction keyword, Kragnos is treated as a general in addition to this model that is chosen to be the army general. This can synergize really well if you want to get full coverage of those command abilities across the table. If you have your general on one side and Kragnos on the other, chances are that if you want to make someone immune to battle shock, you are going to be covering most of the table for your command ability. Unfortunately, Kragnos doesn't have any command abilities of his own, but at least he does get a buff on the generic ones. And the next thing to say just before we go into abilities is that you can include Kragnos in a destruction army even if he does not have the army's keyword on his war scroll. If you do so, he cannot benefit from any of that army's allegiance abilities, and you cannot include any mercenary units in your army. So basically, he can go to any destruction faction. He may not synergize quite as well, but who needs synergy when you're going to cause that many wounds and you're going to charge off and just bash people relentlessly in the face with a massive mace? But seriously, if your army is trying to accomplish something using something particular from your own battle tome, just be aware that he isn't going to have these abilities. He might not be able to deep strike like some of the other heroes and things like that. So just bear that in mind when you take him, if you take him. And if you take Kragnos, you can't include any mercenary units in your army. Now, I thought mercenary units were kind of something that was going away, but that it is included in this makes me think that there are going to be new mercenary units that we are going to be able to use across the different factions in the new General's Handbook. So watch this space. Okay, on to abilities. The first one is Bellow of Rage. When wounded, Kragnos bellows at the top of his lungs, the sound waves bursting the eardrums of those nearby and rocking buildings at their foundations. What's significant about this is it starts with at the end of any phase. Your shooting phase, my shooting phase, your combat phase, my combat phase, any player phase. If any wounds were allocated to this model in that phase and were not negated, roll the dice for each other unit and each defensible terrain feature within 6 inches of this model. If the roll is equal to or greater than the Bellow of Rage value shown on the model's damage table, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds, or that defensible terrain feature is demolished. Designer's note: any terrain feature that can be garrisoned is considered to be a defensible terrain feature for the purposes of this roll. If a defensible terrain feature is demolished, it is no longer considered to be a defensible terrain feature. All units garrisons must leave, and it can no longer be garrisoned, but models can move into or across it. If a defensible terrain feature is being garrisoned when it is demolished, roll the dice for each model in the garrison. On a 1, that model is slain. The surviving models from the garrison must then be set up within 6 inches of the terrain feature, more than 3 inches away from enemy units. Again, I wonder if defensible terrain is something we're going to see more of in Age of Sigmar 3. They did bring in the garrison rule in the last edition, but in my opinion they gave it to a load of terrain features that people don't use, like the watchtower. It'd be nice to see more terrain pieces get this defensible terrain feature keyword. We'll just have to see how that goes. It looks like you're only going to be able to garrison if you're a low wound count model. Otherwise, that rule there where it says on a 1 the model is slain is going to become obscene. Be fun if it is the case that you can do that. But I really like this ability. I kind of feel like if Kragnos is getting charged by something that potentially does impact hits, it's like, oh, I'm going to damage you when I charge you. Oh, really? Well, actually, on a 5+ or a 4+ or a 3+, I'm going to damage you back if any of that gets through. Next ability is Destroyer of the Draconith Empire. Kragnos hunted down dragonkind across all of the ancient realms and carried an abiding hatred of their kin to this day. You can reroll charge rolls and hit rolls for this model while it's within 12 inches of any enemy Star Drakes, Dracoths or Dracolines. Rerolling hit rolls when you already hit on a 3 is really nice. It is quite situational, but I like it because it fits with his background. I did make a video about Kragnos' lore, everything we know to date. I'll put a link in the description for those who are interested in that. What's really got me intrigued about this is the word Drakes, because I know we've got Star Drakes, I know we've got Dracoths, I know we've got Dracolines. I have not seen any Drakes as far as I'm aware. So this might be a brand new unit that we haven't yet seen for the Stormcast. Here's hoping we see something along those lines in that new starter box for AOS 3. Next up we have Rampaging Destruction. This galloping god pounds through the press of his foes, his hooves flattening armoured warriors left and right. This is the ability that was causing all the palaver and all the hype before the Warscroll was revealed. After this model makes a charge move, you can either roll the dice for each enemy unit that is within 1 inch of this model, or you can pick one enemy monster within 1 inch of this model and roll 2d6. If you roll the dice for each enemy unit within 1 inch of that model, on a 2+, that unit suffers d6 mortal wounds. If you pick one enemy monster within 1 inch of this model and roll 2d6, on a 7, nothing happens. On any other roll, that monster suffers a number of mortal wounds equal to the score of the dice used for the 2d6 roll multiplied together. For example, a 2d6 roll of a 2 and a 6 would inflict 12 mortal wounds, as 2 times 6 is 12. So this is where you get your potential 36 mortal wounds caused against the monster on the charge. This is just out of this world. Now you do have to roll a double 6 to achieve this, but believe me when I say this, they are just as likely to be rolled as a double 1. I've got a table which shows the probabilities of outcome to rolling 2 dice if you don't believe me. Whether you're rolling 1 dice or you're doing the 2d6 attack, they both have about a 1 in 6 chance of failing. But if you take Kragnos against a monster heavy list, and my own prediction is that we're going to get monsters the kind of way that we got endless spells in AOS 2, and you're positioned well, and you get the double turn, and you slay one monster, roll the double, go into another monster and slay him outright, songs will be sung about that day. The next ability is Icon of Destruction. Kragnos is revered and held in awe by warriors that belong to the Grand Alliance of Destruction. Add one to the bravery characteristic of friendly destruction units wholly within 12 inches of this model. This gives Kragnos some synergy with the destruction army that you take him with, but to be honest, it's not a great benefit. And lastly, we have the shield in violet. Tuskbreaker makes Kragnos impervious to even the most potent magical hexes and bolts. Each time this model is affected by a spell or an endless spell ability, you can roll 3d6. If the roll is greater than the casting value for that spell or endless spell, ignore the effects of that spell or endless spell's ability on this model. Designer's note: use the casting value on the spell or endless spell's Warscroll, not the casting roll for the spell or endless spell. That designer's note is significant because you've got people all around the shop now, like Techless and other wizards, getting plus whatever to their casting values, making it almost impossible for some armies to truly be able to dispel those. So that is done on the casting value on the Warscroll, and you get an extra die. It means that it is actually quite likely to succeed. And it's nice that it's spell or endless spell. As we said before, it just gives Kragnos that ability to deflect a few mortal wounds that he doesn't naturally have through his armor save. So that is it. What do we think? Personally, I really love this Warscroll. I think that it really brings out the character of Kragnos, and from the stuff that I learned doing the lore video, his lore is really well represented in this Warscroll. I think that on the tabletop, he still does have some weaknesses, so he doesn't have a save against mortal wounds. He doesn't have fly and is on a massive base, so he is really going to struggle if people start feeding him units or start trying to screen him out. He's mostly effective against monsters, but a clever general will be able to zone him out and stop him from getting into those monsters. So he isn't going to do everything on his own. You're going to need to be smart when you play with him and bring those units that are going to clear the chaff and clear the lines in front of him so that he can get into the meat of the army. I was chatting to a friend of mine earlier saying that he is going to shine on the double turn because this will give you the ability to break through those lines that your enemy set up, and then he can just charge through and start wreaking havoc around the back. But yeah, can't wait to see him on the tabletop. Phenomenal model, phenomenal lore, great addition to the game. And I think at this point I've said enough about Kragnos, so thank you very much for watching, especially if you made it all the way to the end. I've been 9 Inch Charge, and I'll catch you next time.